Hello, I'm Eddie from Kippo Models, and today I'm going to show you how to assemble one of our building kits. Here I have a selection of some of the buildings that we produce. These are our display buildings. So what I'd like to show you today is how to assemble one of these kits in part 1, and in part 2 we'll look at how to paint them in this kind of style. Now, I wouldn't say I was the best at painting these kind of buildings, but I can certainly show you how I paint them to look like this. Now, a lot of these small buildings are modular, so they use similar parts. So for instance, this building here, this line side hut, this one here, this one here, this one here, and this one here, they all use the same size of door. So this is the door panel. And the idea is that you glue the door panel on the back of the front panel there. And the reason why I do the door separate is because you might not want the door in there, you might want it to open, you might want to saw holes in it, but also if you paint it, you can then glue it on afterwards, which is what I've done with all these buildings. And of course you get a much neater finish because you don't have to paint a line down the side of the building. Same with the window frames as well. The building that we're going to make today is the toilet block. This uses the same front panel as this hut here, but it uses the same side panels as the line side hut without the door there. It uses the same fascia boards and guttering panels, roof panels, but there's no chimney. So we're making this one first because I don't actually have a display model of the toilet block. So these are the tools that you'll need to assemble and build one if you want to build it to the same sort of standard and style as these ones here. So this stuff here, this is called chemical metal. Now you don't need to buy such a large tub of this. You can buy small tubes this kind of size, which is all you would need for one building. You need this to fill in the corner joints. These ones here. You don't have to fill in the corner joints if you don't want to, but it does make for a nice finish. The other things you might need are some needle files, some sandpaper, and some super glue, and that should be all that you need. So here we have the kit of parts. So we have a rear wall, some side walls, front panel, some doors, this one here, I'll just move that to the side. The doors, I'm going to use two different doors today. These are my new style of doors. It's got a door handle and it has a little window at the top. We've got two roof panels. We have a ladies and gentlemen sign. We have two drain pipes. We'll have some roofing tiles. We have some fascia boards for the ends. And we also have some guttering. So the first thing we need to do is clean up all of the pieces using the sandpaper and needle files. You might not need the needle files, but they are quite useful for cleaning up the brickwork here along the edges. Now this particular piece doesn't need any cleaning up on the front. If we turn it over, what we can do is we can just give a quick sand along there and along there. Now I do apologise about the noise. That's the extractor fan which I've put on due to some other things which I'm doing currently in the workshop. So I've given this a quick sand along there. So as you can see, it didn't need much of a sand. It'd be like 30 seconds, and that's that piece finished. So we're now going to do the same for all 4 sides. What we're going to do on the front panel, just to give this a quick sand along here and clean up these pieces here, around there. All these pieces are cast in a flat mould, and what you get is a hygroscopic effect around the edges of the mould. Tend to curl up the corners at the sides. So you just need to sand those bits off to make it nice and flat. So we're going to clean up the pieces now. This one here needs a little bit of clean up over here. So when we look at the fascia boards, there's a small amount that needs to be cleaned up along the edges there. So I usually just run them along like this. And then for the inside, like so. Some of the roof tiles might need a little bit of clean up along the edges there. So again, just sand like this. We have the ladies and gentlemen signs. These are quite easy to clean up. You can probably snap off some of the flashing there. Quick clean with the sandpaper. And you can also sand the back just to give it a little bit more adhesion when gluing on. When you clean up the ridge tiles, there might be a little bit of flashing there on the corners. So you can use a needle file to clean them up. This one has a thicker bit on it, so that's going to require putting on the bench there. Okay, well, we look at the roof panels. There's a little bit of flashing to clean up around the edges there. So you can run it along like this. Okay, just to take any sharp edges off there. When we do the guttering, you can run the sandpaper along here, and then you can use a needle file to clean up the ends. when you have windows on doors like them, you can use the needle file just to clean up around the edges there. For doing this kind of work, I use a rectangular file like this one here. Now the hardest part of cleaning up all of these pieces is actually the guttering, the drain pipes. These are quite delicate. It's very easy to accidentally break the little clips off. And these are actually cast this way up, which is why there's a little bit of flashing to sand off. So when you do sand these, just be careful that you don't snap them off. So for instance, if you're sanding them on a piece of sandpaper like this, try not to run the piece over the end, because when you bring it back again, you could catch the clips on the end of the sandpaper and snap them off. This has happened to me before. So you're best to sort of do a circular motion on the sandpaper very carefully to remove the flashing. Or you can use a file, you can turn it over. You can just use a needle file, any kind of file, and just work your way along and file those bits off, like so. So you can use either or a combination of the two. So now we're ready to assemble our pieces. They should just slot together like this. Now these particular ones are a little bit stiff to put together because they weren't actually meant to fit together. Because these are, again, like I said earlier, these are my reject pieces. So normally they fit together easier, like so. Okay, we can then just turn them around. The great thing about doing this is that the building is sort of freestanding without actually gluing any of the pieces together. This makes it much easier to get the building reasonably square. What I use is a piece of paper, and you can sort of line it up with the corner there, like so. And then you can use super glue to glue the pieces together. What I normally do is I just run some super glue along the edges like this while it's sitting on the paper. If it becomes glued to the paper, that's okay, you can just rip it off afterwards, but you don't want it getting stuck to the workbench. You could also put some masking tape or sellotape around it to sort of hold the pieces together if they're a loose fit. That can really help when doing the super glue. What you might find is it's easier to tip the building up like this while you pour in the super glue on each side. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put my mask on, because the super glue fumes really affect my asthma. So. if you have a bit of an accident and you snap a piece off, like I just did before, what you can do is you can just super glue these back in again, and it won't affect the finished quality of the model, because we still need to fill in all the corner pieces here. So the next step is to glue the roof panels on. So just make sure that you get the tiles the right way round, and at the top here you want to get the panels lined up with the top edge there. So you don't want to have the tile like this or like this. Try and get it near the top. But if you do glue it on slightly skew, it doesn't really matter, because the ridge tiles will hide that anyway. And try and make sure that you get the roof panels even on both sides where there's an overhang. It just means that when you put the fascia boards on, that they will both be the same on each end. So just run the super glue along here, along this edge here, and up here. You might want to just hold the panel in place while the glue sets, or what you can do, you can get your two roof panels and you can put a bit of tape on the back to tape them together, and that way it's like a hinge, and then you can sort of drape it over the top and then let it to dry in that position. So I'm going to do that, and I'll show you that just now. So the next step we're going to look at is how to glue on the ridge tiles. So what to do is make sure that you know where they're going to go before you glue them on. You might find there's an extra small tile that goes at the end there. You can either cut this to size beforehand, or you can cut it afterwards. So what I would do is run a line of glue along the top edge of the roof and then stick down the tiles, rather than sticking the glue on here, because otherwise I find it just sticks to your fingers too much. So the next stage, which I'm going to show you, is how to fill the corner joints in. So this is where we use the chemical metal, which is a polyester resin, which has a metal powder through it to make it into a paste. Now this is quite a large tub. You can buy this from Halfords or B&Q. Now this particular tub is quite old now, and probably 2 or 3 years old, and what happens is that over time it goes a bit hard, so it's kind of went off a bit. So I'll do my best with this, but if you buy a fresh tub, it's nice, sort of smooth putty, and it just spreads on really nicely, like fondant icing almost. So I'll do my best with what I've got in here. So when you mix it up, you don't need much hardener. You can use the tiniest amount. Probably a tiny dot like that. And we'll go for this much hardener here. Now I'm just going to mix up enough to do one corner at a time. I think that you probably could do all 4 corners at once, but it sets quite quickly, so you want to give yourself a bit of time if you've not used this stuff before. So I advise just doing the one corner at a time. So what we're going to do, we're just going to spread it on like this. Now with chemical metal, the longer you leave it, the harder it gets. So you want to work quickly. Now you notice this is quite stiff, and I would say that after maybe 3 or 4 minutes, if you have a fresh tub of chemical metal or tube, that this is the kind of state it will get to maybe after 3 minutes. So you've got to work quickly. Now most of this we're going to wipe off. I have used quite a lot here, probably more than is necessary. So it doesn't take too long to do this, just a few minutes. So what we're going to do now is use a wet cloth, and we're going to wipe off any excess that we don't want. The water doesn't hinder the filler in any way, and if you notice that you've missed a bit once you've wiped most of it off, you can always go back and fill the hole in again. The water won't hinder your progress. And when you wipe it off, try and wipe it off away from the wall, so you can kind of pinch it like that. That seems to work quite well. And if you want to just finalize the joins, you can use a sharp object like a screw or the end of a needle file or a pencil, and then you can just scribe around some of the joins there. And when you scribe the grouting, it does pull out small pieces there, but you can just leave them to set like that, and then you can sand it off afterwards if you want. You don't have to neaten them up with a sharp object, but I just find that it makes the appearance look a bit better. And again, you've got to work quickly before it starts to set fully. Although sometimes I find that once it's set and it's sort of a bit hard, it's not fully hardened, it can be easier to scribe once it's hardened up a little bit. So now we have 4 grouted corners. I'm quite pleased with how they came out. Have a wee look there. Once that's fully dry, I'll give them a quick sand to remove any loose little tiny pieces. There we go. And this will much improve the look once it's been painted. Now you notice that we haven't glued on the fascia boards, guttering, drain pipes, and the reason for this is that it's much easier to spray paint them and then glue them on afterwards. If we look at the line side hub, you can see that I did this painted the pieces and then glued them on afterwards, and it just, in my opinion, looks a bit neater. And also it's a lot easier as well. I mean, if you glue them on and then paint them, you've then got to try and paint these little pieces here, the clips, which is very difficult. So that is the end of part 1.